All right. Welcome, everyone, to another author reading here at TBRCon2023. And I'm very excited today to be joined by Annalee Newitz. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. If you could let folks know a little bit about yourself.
So, I'm a science journalist and a science fiction writer. I've published a few science fiction books and science nonfiction books. I write for places like New Scientist and the New York Times, and lots of places with new and science in the title. So, if there's a magazine with science in the name, I've probably written for it at some point. Um, I'm really interested in thinking about ancient history and deep time, as well as the deep future. So that's kind of how my journalism about geology and about archaeology ends up kind of sliding into my fiction about the future.
Yeah, and I'm just going to show a little overlay here with some of Annalee's books. So,
There they
Autonomous,
are.
Four Lost Cities, The Future of Another Timeline, Scatter, Adapt, and Remember. And I wanted to ask you, I find it really cool, like you're saying how, anything that has science in the title, I'm writing for that magazine. But what is it like for you in terms of this creative process when you're going through something like fiction versus nonfiction?
Yeah. So at this point, I'm lucky enough that I'm able to pretty much switch off in terms of books. Like I'll write a fiction novel and then I'll write a nonfiction book. And in fact, just yesterday, I wrote the last sentence on my next nonfiction book. So I'm right about to release my next novel, and now I'm done with my next nonfiction book. And I find that that process is really rejuvenating for me creatively.
Mhm.
Like, I gain so much from my research into various scientific areas. And pretty much, if you've read my nonfiction and then you read my fiction, you will definitely see the footprints of all that research, like all over my fiction, where I'll bring in issues around artificial intelligence. There's always like weird geology Easter eggs in my books. A lot of my most recent nonfiction book was about ancient cities. And in my new novel, The Terraformers, there's a ton of stuff about city building and all the different ways that people build cities. Because I think for me, that was what was so amazing researching the history of urban life, was that, oh, like many city traditions diverge from each other really dramatically. And here in the West, we have like this idea of how cities should look, and it doesn't really resemble how cities look in other parts of the world at all.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's like it's a constant. Uh, it's not a tug of war, although sometimes it is. It's much more like I spend a lot of time with nonfiction, and then at a certain point, I just really desperately want to start making things up, and so
Mhm.
it's a good outlet. So I don't have to be one of those journalists that starts making things up. I can just like stick it in my fiction.
That's awesome though. And in Four Lost Cities, there was one whole section on Pompeii, which for me was really fascinating because it was the one place in that book that I've actually visited. And you're right, there's just like this historiography between the past and the present and our conception of what a city is. But even somewhere like San Francisco, where you live, there's so much history just within, the stratification of the city itself. I think there was like a fire in the early 20th century that really devastated a lot of San Francisco. And then now you see it and it's like, you're right, in the Western cultures we have this really weird perception of what a city entails because ours are so much newer. But then you go somewhere
Hmm.
else in the world and you're like, holy shit, there's like, this history just within like a single, 10-meter section of a street, or there's like a shrine or a temple that's just nestled in between all these like modern steel and glass kind of buildings. It's amazing.
Yeah, I love seeing that. I love when when a city will kind of like pull back its collar a little bit and show some of the history, and you can kind of look in, and it's really some cities really emphasize that a lot, and it's really great.
Yeah, just like a little risque moment, just showing off what
Yeah, like in Mexico City, they're just like always like, look, here's some Aztec situations.
yeah, it's the same for me here in Quito. It's like centuries and
Yeah.
centuries from like the Inca through the conquistadors and like all of that just layered within each other. And it's like, this is not meant for driving cars. A lot of the places is like,
Yeah.
this is literally
I'm
like the width of a
so
horse carriage.
I'm so jealous that you get to be in that place. I one of the great things about Inca cities is that they really demonstrate strongly how a city doesn't have to look like the Western idea, because we always, in the West, we think cities should always have a marketplace. Like whenever
Mhm.
you hear about, like, either if you're reading like George R. Martin about, like, a fantasy world, or whether you're reading just like a regular magazine piece, it's always like, oh, well, and then of course there's the marketplace.
Mhm.
But the Inca did not really have marketplaces, and they had these incredible, sophisticated cities that were not built around a central marketplace. And
Mhm.
it really befuddled Europeans when they came. They were like, what? This cannot be a city. And it's like, hey, buddy, not only is it a city, it was like a giant empire that conquered huge parts of South America way better than
Exactly.
you guys were doing over there in whatever freaking European country you're from. So
Bringing your diseases and shit.
I know, stealing our awesome squash and peppers.
Oh, amazing. And you mentioned the Terraformers. So this is your new book. I'll show the cover off right here. So beautiful. It's
Oh,
also
yeah.
gracing our background right here. But that's out on January 31st.
That's
So just
right.
in a very, very soon through Tor Books.
Yep.
So if you could tell everyone a little bit about the book, a little synopsis, but also how you're feeling about the upcoming release.
Yeah, so I'm feeling really good about it. Very excited. I'm very glad that people are going to get to see it. It is a multi generational tale of terraforming an Earth like planet. The planet is being developed by a kind of semi evil interstellar real estate company that creates kind of experience worlds. And so they were like, oh, let's create a Pleistocene Earth. People are going to love that. And the point of view characters are all people who are the terraformers. So they're the actual workers, construction workers, farmers, environmental scientists, the kinds of people who actually can build ecosystems and cities. And so the book takes place over 1600 years, which is pretty exciting.
Mhm.
And we see three different groups over that time building different aspects of the world and their relationships with each other and their romances and their struggle to deal with this rapacious real estate company.
I love that though, and it's exactly what we talked about before. It's like the historiography of this place, and I don't know, like in all of my looking into this book and anticipation for it, I hadn't come across this aspect about like experience planets. And so kind of how for me, I heard that and I thought of kind of a Westworld type of situation, which is really cool. So it's like that has me even more excited than I
It
was before.
definitely, yes, it has a bit of that kind of Westworld idea, and also ecotourism. This sort of like
Mhm.
creating this kind of special eco reserve that's Pleistocene Earth, and many of the characters are not Homo sapiens. So it's a book with a lot of non-human animal characters. There's robot characters. There's a sentient flying train who we're going to meet in the reading I'm going to do in a second. So it's a very it's a world that's very much alive in many different ways.
Fantastic. Well, you just teased that train. Let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about the section that you're going to be reading, and why you wanted to read that particular section, and then I'll let you go right into it.
All right. So the book is written in three parts because it's three different generations. And so I'm going to be reading to you from the beginning of the third section. So this is the most, this generation on the planet is very urban. The planet's been completely developed and the cities are thriving. And now they're sort of struggling with all of the questions that cities deal with in the modern world, with houseless people, with income inequality, all that kind of stuff. Um, and I really wanted to read from this section because it's a great introduction to two of my favorite characters in the book, one of which is a sentient flying train named Scrubjay, who is part of the public transit infrastructure on the planet. And a big plot arc throughout the whole book is how do you develop public transit for a planet? And so the
Mhm.
answer is make the transit be able to think for itself. Um, and Scrubjay is just doing their thing, and they meet this investigative journalist who's a cat, named Moose, somewhat confusingly named Moose. There is also a character who's a moose named Whistle, but that's from the first part. So if you want to meet Whistle, who is another beloved character, you'll have to read the book.
All right. Well, go for it, Annalee. This sounds amazing.
Here's the book. Okay, sorry. Very excited. This chapter is called Scrub Jay. Everybody who lived in the city called it L'Orange, but Verdant's real estate agents named it Forest View because they thought it would attract off-world buyers, which is why the sign for Boreal Station had been repeatedly corrected by the locals. Today, the words City of Forest View had been eroded with a catalyst, and City of L'Orange was sprayed in bright orange over top. Boreal Station was the end of the line, servicing a park full of trails and picnic cabins that stretched from the northern edge of the city into the forest. The wide, clean train platform was mostly empty. As Scrub Jay opened their doors, passengers stood and shuffled around, looking for stray belongings. "We've arrived at Boreal Station. Last stop, friends," the train announced. "I'll be heading back down south in 10 minutes. A family of hominins gathered their packs together, and two worms requested access to their exit, a cylinder of moist soil they entered through an aperture in the floor. The train left their doors open as the last person left, enjoying the feel of northern winds playing over the warm wires of their interior I can never pronounce this word. Oh my God. The warm wires of their interior anemometers. With only a 10-minute layover, the train wouldn't have time to do a full wash cycle on their cars, but they could air the place out. With only 30 seconds left before all aboard, a scruffy-looking cat padded into the first car and found a seat near the front windows. Afternoon sun poured over them, and the cat's thick brown fur snagged the light, creating streaks of reddish gold. Scrub Jay spiraled into the air from the platform, their anodized steel cladding turning their whole body into a rainbow. Riders texted them stop requests. This was a local line, which meant the train would let passengers off anywhere along the eel route. When the rusty brown cat didn't text a request, Scrub Jay assumed they were headed to Comfort Sea Spaceport near Left Hand. There was something that said, "I'm leaving town," in the cat's distracted expression, and they had full saddle packs slung over their back. So many passengers had already requested the port stop that texting was probably unnecessary. But then the cat snoozed right through downtown Left Hand, east of the crumbling ziggurat, and still made no requests to land. Scrub Jay had misjudged. The cat must be headed for the other end of the line, on the southern tip of the continent Masqua. Otherwise, they surely would have requested a stop by now. Passengers came and went. They bickered and snuggled, their mouth noises and texts blurring into a warm information halo of social interaction. When Scrub Jay first began flying this route centuries ago, they used to listen to people's chatter, trying to parse their customers' needs, or maybe get some news from off-world. But they almost never learned anything useful. Instead, they heard pointless exchanges about the angle of the sun or terrible secrets about people being disappointed in love and abused at work. Over time, they began to feel a prickle of guilt. They were invading the privacy of writers who had no idea that Scrub Jay could hear them. In recent decades, the train deliberately avoided analyzing what people said to each other on board unless there was a safety risk. Instead of eavesdropping, Scrub Jay plotted and replotted their passengers' stop requests in an ever-changing internal model that maximized efficiency while also offering the beautiful views for which this particular train route was known. They flew through 4 sunrises, using 210 seats and 40 sleeper berths to carry 4,567 passengers to their destinations. At last, the vertebrae mountains dwindled to foothills, and the train could see the southern coast. Scrub Jay circled over the Eel estuary, where fresh water from the mountains met ocean salt. In the distance, across the slim strait between Masqua and the southern continent Tooth, the jagged peaks of Tustin loomed over the gleaming red roofs of the city's houses. 106 people, mostly dogs, would be connecting with the ferry to Tooth. The cat was still gracefully curled up in a sleeper. They made no ferry transfer requests. Now Scrubjay was getting genuinely curious, despite their general aversion to taking a personal interest in writers. Was the cat going somewhere near Estuary Station, or maybe taking private transit into the ocean reserves? As they prepared to descend, Scrubjay turned in a slow spiral that would bring their 3 cars to a soft landing on the Estuary Station platform. Over the past 18 months, Scrubjay and the rest of the flying train fleet had noticed a shift in land use around the station. A nearby campsite full of recycled trellis shacks was home to a growing number of Homo diversus, bots, and other people. The campers remained carbon negative, so the environmental rescue team didn't feel that anything was out of balance. Still, the trains occasionally observed to each other that it didn't quite feel in balance either. Scrubjay planned to stay on the landing pad overnight, partly because they needed a break and partly to welcome connecting passengers from tomorrow's returning ferry. Sometimes, if they were feeling adventurous, they would walk around outside by forking their consciousness into one of the 2 remote bodies they kept on board. Today, however, they wanted to do a deep clean and check messages from the rest of the fleet. And of course, they would log some time in Sunbuilder's Flare, the latest update to the strategy game that they were playing with their best friends Contrail and Peach. So all the passengers get off. I'm just skipping ahead a tiny little bit. And the train plays a little Sunbuilders, do a little checking in with their parent, and then they realize that the cat is still on board. "Excuse me, friend, but we're at the last stop." Scrubjay spoke quietly out of a speaker near the cat's face. The cat slitted their eyes and stretched. "That was a lovely flight, friend." It was rare that a passenger addressed the train directly, and Scrubjay took an instant liking to them. "Thank you. You can call me Scrubjay. What's your name?" "I'm Moose. I hope you don't mind if I stay on board for a while longer, Scrubjay. If I'm totally honest, I don't have anywhere else to go." Scrubjay had a standard answer for this complaint. "Would you like me to help you find a destination? I fly to hundreds of cities and eco resorts, and I'll bet there's one that will appeal to you." Sitting on their haunches, tail curled neatly around toes, Moose looked out the front window at the people clustered around the ferry hall. "It's not that I can't decide where to go. I'm not ready to go live in one of those shacks outside." They broke off abruptly and jumped to the floor, finding a new seat beneath a chair. Scrubjay moved their audio emissions to another speaker that was closer to the cat. "Can you tell me more? I still might be able to help." Moose sighed. "I've lived in L'Orange for my whole life, 275 years last month, and I love it. I have a really good job there, too. I mean, not a high-paying job, but one I actually care about." They licked a paw and ran it over an ear. "But, you know the routine. Wages haven't kept up with the cost of living, my landlord hiked up the rent, and now I'm out on my ass without a tongue to clean it." Scrubjay looked at the camp outside, not just as a form of land use, but as a set of social interactions, and began to assemble an uncomfortable analysis. You couldn't find another place to live? Not in L'Orange. Everything is so gentrified now. My neighborhood used to be really cheap. Lots of housing, great cafes and media halls. Now all these H-sapiens are moving in from the city ships because they want that authentic Pleistocene feeling. Half of them are remotes, which is extra annoying. They're idle most of the time. Why do they even need houses? "I don't know. My home is the root, so I guess I'm my own house. But I grew up in Spider City, where people build houses if they need them." Moose yowled a bitter laugh. "Yeah, that's where my grandparents were born. It's great if you're a citizen of Spider, but I don't have that privilege. I'm lucky not to be slaved to Verdance, at least not for now." Scrubjay assigned 2 more processes to this conversation. They wanted to get some data on gentrification in L'Orange and correlate it with the informal settlement at Estuary Station. Meanwhile, they continued to chat. "Can't you find somewhere less expensive to live? Maybe in one of the Emerald Cities off-world, but I don't want to live in a place where I have to wear branded shirts or agree to buy 2 game streams per week." Scrubjay had to laugh. I guess it is kind of obnoxious, but I do like the Hydrogen Guild shirts from Sunbuilders. Moose reached front legs forward, their back bending steeply, then came out from under the chair to lie in an elongated triangle of sunlight falling through the front windows. The Hydrogen Guild is fine, but I'm not into shirts, you know what I mean? Never needed to wear one myself, but I think they can be nice on other people. So, I take it you're a citizen of Spider City? I was built there, so technically I am, but none of the flying train fleet live anywhere in particular. I read that Sasky Transit is a self-governing entity. Very few people cared about how Sasky's transit system was managed, and Scrubjay was excited to talk about it. We are self-governing, but it's not tied to specific locations like a city. We're a worker co-op, tied to each other. Wow. Moose made an unimpressed meh noise. Very old school. Mildly offended, the train said nothing and initiated a cleaning sequence in their back car. Moose sent another text. Maybe you can explain something to me, Scrubjay. Sure. How in the shit did Spider City manage to form a government on this planet? The whole rock was developed by Verdance, and they sold every other city on Sasky to property management firms. Well, the Archaea have a treaty. The cat stood up to pace the car, then sat down again, ears cocked forward. And that's another thing. Nobody off-world has ever heard of the Archaea. How did a bunch of H. diversus gain sovereignty on an H. sapiens world? Scrubjay wasn't sure where Moose was going with this line of questioning. There are lots of people on Sasky who aren't H. sapiens. You, for example. I can't own property here, though. I'm a renter. Only H. sapiens can buy. Kind of weird that the Archaea are the one exception to that rule, don't you think? Now Moose was starting to piss them off. My parent is an Archaean. You said your grandparents are from Spider City. I don't understand why you are so suspicious. Do you have something against governments? As they spoke, the train combed through recent housing statistics from L'Orange and discovered Moose wasn't alone. Over the past 2 years, thousands of renters had been evicted and were unable to find other housing in the city. The numbers were higher for renters in the Emerald cities. There was no follow-up data on what happened to people after they got priced out. The cat leapt back onto the bench under Scrubjay's front windows. I'm sorry, friend. I didn't mean to sound hostile. I'm a data historian, so it's my job to be skeptical of everything. You might not believe it, but I actually like government. I wish this planet had more of it. Scrubjay trained another visual sensor on the small mammal with the sharp words. What's a data historian? Well, it can mean a lot of things, but in my case, it means I research old data to find patterns that might help people figure things out in the present. I write stories about Sasky's history for the L'Orange Messenger. They sent a link to the continent's biggest news server, as if Scrubjay might not know it. Yes, I read it all the time, the train said impatiently, spawning a new process to grab the latest news. I can't believe you write for the Messenger, but still can't afford to live in L'Orange. And that's where we'll end it. That's the beginning of a friendship that ends up being incredibly important in the rest of the book.
Very cool. Damn H. sapiens ruining everything.
I know, H. sapiens. They're just like, they just really fetishize this whole Pleistocene thing.
Did a great job, though, in terms of capturing these personified characters. You have a cat on one hand and a train on the other. I really love Scrubjay.
Yeah, I love Scrubjay too. Scrubjay is actually modeled on the Melbourne streetcar system.
Oh, really?
So Scrubjay, if you ever want to know what Scrubjay looks like, just look up Melbourne streetcars.
Fantastic. Well, that book again is The Terraformers, which is out on January 31st through Tor Books. That's available in paperback. And is it coming out in hardcover as well?
It's coming out in hardcover, yeah. And you can get it now in hardcover and ebook form. And there's also an amazing audiobook, I should say, that has some incredible train music in it because the trains sing. And they, the people at Macmillan Audio like actually created a train song, and it just blew me away.
That's fantastic. Amazing. Well, Annalee also has a great podcast with Charlie Jane Anders called Our Opinions Are Correct. I highly recommend everyone check it out. that's actually been one of the big inspirations for my own podcast, SFF Addicts.
Oh,
I appreciate what you
that's
both are
so
doing, what you
awesome.
both have done for the podcasting community, what you
Oh,
continue to
thank you
do
so
for the
much. That's
podcasting
awesome.
community.
Well, I'm really glad that we're helping to create even more awesome podcasts.
Yeah. Got to build the podcasting world as much as possible. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Annalee, if you could let everyone know where they can find you on social media before we
Sure.
close out here.
Yeah. So you can always find me at AnnaleeNewitz.com on the web. I'm also on Mastodon at Annalee N at wandering.shop. I'm still like learning how to give the address on Mastodon, but I'm at Wandering Shop and I'm Annalee N. You can also find me on Instagram at Ghidorah Not Weak.
That's a Godzilla reference for anyone who out there who
It
doesn't know.
is, yes. It's
Yeah,
the best kaiju. Most underrated.
exactly. The most underrated. That's yeah, yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Annalee. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this today. And thank you for reading from the Terraformers. I'm very excited for this
Yeah,
book.
thanks again. Yeah, thanks again for having me. And yeah, have a great rest of your con.
Thank you so much.